Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into humanity's absolute obsession with predicting the future, and we're going to critically examine the really profound modern barriers to our progress. We'll be looking closely at the What's Next core essay by Dr. Susan Edwards, and then we'll move right into the incredibly thought-provoking Theme 8.
So to truly understand where we're going and how we can actually design a better future, we first have to ask ourselves how we've historically tried to imagine what's next. What's next for humanity? It's a deceptively simple question, right? But as human beings, we are fundamentally forward-looking creatures. We've always wanted to know what's coming around the bend so we can prepare, adapt, and, ideally, thrive.
From ancient rulers in Mesopotamia all the way to modern thinkers in Manhattan, we've basically always been trying to gaze into the proverbial crystal ball to foresee the future. And why? Well, to gain a strategic advantage. But here's the catch. Time and again, we failed to interpret it correctly. We so often misunderstand the political motives or just the purely speculative limits of the people offering these grand predictions.
Yet sometimes, these visionaries hit the nail right on the head. Take Dmitry Mendeleev, who actually predicted the existence of entirely undiscovered elements just by leaving gaps in his periodic table. Or look at Nikola Tesla. Over a century ago, this guy accurately envisioned a global brain connecting everyone. He predicted wireless devices small enough to fit in our pockets and even driverless cars. And he didn't just imagine it. Back in 1898, he literally demonstrated a remote-controlled boat that he designed himself. Just incredible.
But as Dr. Susan Edwards points out in our core essay, Tesla's incredible foresight wasn't exactly flawless. He also incorrectly predicted that systematic resource management and technology would completely eliminate wars, droughts, and natural disasters. He even thought education would make women the dominant gender. To borrow a phrase from the poet T.S. Eliot, Tesla had the experience but missed the meaning. He completely missed the deeper meaning of human nature and what we were actually willing to do with these imagined futures.
So why do so many brilliantly smart people get the future so wrong? Well, it usually boils down to three massive blind spots. First, leaders frequently just choose to ignore futures that force them to face uncomfortable truths. Second, the folks making these predictions historically lack diverse, collective lived experiences, which totally prevents them from seeing the whole picture. And third, even with our fancy 21st century computer programs, our predictions are still only as accurate as our data inputs. If the data is flawed or biased, you better believe the predicted future will be too.
All right, let's jump right into Theme 8, Milestones and Limits. All of this historical drive to push boundaries builds directly into our contemporary reality, and honestly, it's a bit of a reality check. We've achieved things our ancestors couldn't have even dreamed of, but these staggering modern achievements come at a really steep cost. Those gleaming new smartphones in our pockets, they rely on Congolese miners risking their lives every single day to extract cobalt. We're seeing emerging global conflicts over rare earth metals. And beyond the Earth itself, we're constantly bumping up against the physical limits of our own bodies and brains, which, still falter, forget, decay, and die. We are bounded by finite resources on literally all sides.
This brings us to a really crucial concept captured perfectly by sociologist Ulrich Beck. He coined the term reflexive modernization. Sounds a bit academic, I know, but it basically describes the process where the consequences of human progress in the modern era actually circle back to cause us harm. It is the ultimate paradox of progress. The very things we build to elevate our civilization inevitably come back to bite us.
Think about it like the ultimate double-edged sword. Burning fossil fuels undeniably expanded human potential and improved the quality of life for billions of people around the globe. That's a fact. But simultaneously, that exact same progress created a severe global climate crisis that is now actively threatening the potential of future generations, especially in vulnerable areas worldwide. The grand solution simply became the new problem.
And we see this paradox repeating literally everywhere we look. We manufactured and marketed drugs to ease people's pain and improve their lives, only to watch addiction take control of millions of those exact same lives. We created email, social media, and smartphones to make ourselves more productive and connected, right? Yet these exact same technologies have paradoxically left us way more distracted, more physically isolated, and vastly more mentally unwell.
When you really look at the heavy toll of all this reflexive modernization, the climate crisis, the mental health epidemic, the intense resource conflicts, this quote from the text just hits incredibly hard. It completely validates why Generation Z feels such a deep, totally justified pessimism about the future compared to those who came before them. They're essentially inheriting the harm phase of the progress that earlier generations got to enjoy.
Which brings us to our next section, the new visionaries, and their goal of transcending the limits of humanity.
Knowing all these unintended consequences, where exactly are the inventors and disruptors of the 21st century looking to innovate next? Well, today's dreamers are aiming to transcend human limits entirely. Our new visionaries are imagining a future deeply intertwined with artificial intelligence, cyborg brain supplements for our puny human minds, and even the wild idea that individual human consciousness could be downloaded, uploaded, or remixed.
These next frontiers are about breaking out of the box entirely. Innovators are working on genetic editing to literally eradicate diseases and massively extend human life. They want to make current physical milestones, like the 2-hour marathon, look like dusty relics of a bygone age. And because our planet is finite, they're looking beyond Earth altogether, aiming for interstellar exploration and terraformed colonies on Mars. They basically want to conquer biology and geography at the same time.
But, this relentless drive brings us to a really profound philosophical dilemma. When reporters asked the famous mountaineer Sir Edmund Hillary why he wanted to climb Mount Everest, his justification was amazingly simple. He just said, because it's there. It is baked into human nature to see a peak and want to conquer it. We see a limit, and our absolute first instinct is to push past it, simply to prove that we can.
Which leaves us with this massive, incredibly vital question to wrap up our explainer today. If the horizon of our potential involves fundamentally altering what it means to be human and risking even more devastating waves of reflexive modernization, we really have to pause and ask ourselves, just because we can build it, does it mean we should? Are there mountains that should remain unclimbed? I want you to take that question with you today. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, and keep questioning what's next.